Okay. Good evening, everyone. I was thinking of starting with dear guests and the protocol, but I think that, last event of 2 intensive weeks, last day of the COP, dear friends. I think that's more appropriate. Welcome to this side event entitled Fostering Nexus Approaches to Increase Climate Resilience. I really want to take this opportunity to thank every co-organizer of this event. Of course, my SIWI colleagues, but also the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, the Japanese Water Forum, and other members of the Water for Climate Pavilion, including also governments of the Netherlands, Federal Republic of Germany, and also Tajikistan, AGWA, IWMI, SIWI, and support of Asian Development Bank, and not least GIZ. So my name is Karen Gardes. I am the acting executive director of SIWI, the Stockholm International Water Institute, and it is my pleasure to be the moderator of tonight's session. Nexus. That's quite a word. There is a lot in that word that is of utmost importance. And at SIWI, the nexus approach and policy coherence is really one of the important things that we strive and that we advocate for in everything that we do. Within our work for mitigation and water's role in it, we show that a great majority of mitigation measures worldwide, including in ecosystems, in food systems, in energy systems, influence or are influenced by water management and water availability in ways that must be understood, better understood, and must also be planned for. Freshwater, coasts, and the ocean are some of the strongest allies for tackling climate change. And a holistic management of these resources from source to sea is essential to adapt and to mitigate the impacts that are coming from climate change. So this means really that science, policy, and practice all need to bridge land, freshwater, coasts, and the ocean to both provide and discover effective climate solutions. We are a few in this room. We are also some online, and I would like to welcome our online audience and followers. This session is also being recorded, so we will make sure to also continue to spread and share the content of this session as we continue. Just to set a little bit the scene, in June of this year, 2023, during the Bonn Climate Change Conference, we initiated a conversation to find out how water figured in the stocktake exercise and how we could contribute to encourage this increased acknowledgement of water in climate policy. And I think these last 10 days have really demonstrated significant progress in that regard. So there was already in June some recognition for water's role, the underlying need for policy coherence, but we still need to make that case very strongly. We haven't reached the whole way. And with this event today, we want to take a step further in this endeavor, and we want to go from identifying the challenges to focus on the solutions and seeing how we can put forward integrated approaches that address these interconnections between water, energy, food, environment, nexus. We want to show that by taking a nexus approach and an integrated approach, it can help in addressing really climate resilience in a much better way. It can allow for more effective forms of governance, recognizing how different natural systems are interlinked, and invite different stakeholders to also co-create these solutions. We need everyone around the table, and we need everyone around the table, again, from source to sea. So that entire chain, that holistic approach to how we manage resources is important. So how do we bring these different sectors together, and how do we create that coherence, which is what we are after? How can we shape practice and policy to really explore beyond the current existing frames of the sector? And this seems, of course, maybe like it's a silver bullet. Oh, if we fix this, everything else will just follow naturally, will flow naturally, I should say. It's not a silver bullet, but it is a contribution to identifying improvements and future solutions. So today I'm very excited because we will hear different experiences from professionals who are already engaged in this cross-sectoral approaches. So we will first have a keynote, and we will then enter into two panel discussions where we will really try to see how we can translate the policy into the practice, and also how we can influence the policy setting itself. So we will really try to combine these two elements. And it is with great pleasure that I introduce our first speaker of today, Director General for Global Health, Equality of Opportunity, Digital Technologies and Food Security from BMZ, Dr. Ariane Hildebrand. You have the floor.
Karin, good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the Water Pavilion, SIWI, and all the supporting organizations for making this session possible. To effectively tackle climate change and enhance resilience, it is crucial to implement integrated policies that recognize the interconnections between water, energy, food, and the environment. In 2011, the German government aimed to develop a global strategy for sustainable water, energy, and food security, and to this end, organized the Bonn Nexus Conference, making the global introduction of the water, energy, food nexus. This effort represented a key element of Germany's contribution to the 2012 World Summit on Sustainable Development in Rio de Janeiro. As such, the nexus concept has become a cornerstone of development cooperation policy, given the interconnected nature of the current global crisis. Resource security, particularly water, energy, and food security, have become global concerns that transcend national borders. These challenges are compounded by factors such as poverty, inequality, war, conflict, and the impacts of climate change. An integrated approach is essential, as these crises cannot be effectively addressed in isolation. Implementing a nexus approach or nexus approaches can be challenging, as it demands a more systemic approach to resource management and substantial reforms in both policy and praxis. Let me give you a few examples. First, it is necessary to close the gap between technical and political perspectives and their respective knowledge communities, and to adopt a solution-oriented, adaptive, context-driven approach to nexus reforms and policy implementation. We must move from nexus thinking to nexus doing. Second, in line with Germany's commitment to an integrated approach outlined in the 2030 Agenda, the BMZ has actively strengthened and applied the nexus approach in its project portfolio. I'm particularly pleased that we will have the opportunity today to hear from some of our projects and learn about how India and Lesotho have helped tackle climate change and enhance resilience through integrated management of land and water resources. Third, in addition to our project portfolio, we have also been advocating the nexus through policy. The climate crisis is primarily a water crisis, significantly affecting agricultural and food systems and posing a threat to global food security. Currently, agriculture accounts for 70% of freshwater withdrawals worldwide. To build resilience against future shocks, a transformation of agri-food systems is necessary, and water must play a central role in designing these systems. Fourth, in an effort to reduce trade-offs between sectors and promote interdisciplinary solutions, we have developed strategies on sustainable agri-food systems and the interlinkages between water, energy, and agriculture, serving as guidelines for German development cooperation projects. To illustrate, BMZ has supported the International Multi-Donor Initiative Water and Energy for Food since 2020. This initiative assists companies and the local private sector in scaling up water, energy, and food innovations in over 50 African and Asian countries in a holistic and cross-sectoral fashion. To date, the initiative has impacted almost 2 million end users, saved over 500,000 tons of CO2, produced 4.4 million tons of food, and reduced water consumption by 5.89 billion liters. To conclude, adopting a nexus approach requires not only vertical and horizontal policy coherence, but political will, strengthened institutions, and a strong governance. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. This was very interesting. And I took note, I tried to structure it just as well as you did with the 4 points. Nexus thinking to nexus doing. Very good, very important. The fact that it actually translates into BMZ's project portfolio, important as well. Climate crisis equals water crisis, recognizing that and thereby aligning the strategies to it. And therefore, the fourth point, integrating it into the strategies of the BMZ and of Germany's development cooperation. And I think by showing exactly step by step how this has influenced everything that you do, that is truly inspiring as an example. So thank you so much for this, this showing the journey that has happened in the German system. I am now also very pleased to share a video from the Secretary General of the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, Dr. Musonda Mumba. Unfortunately, he could not be with us here today due to other commitments, but he was very keen, was very keen on providing a recorded message and a video. So I am very happy to launch the video. Thank you.
Dear participants to this important side event on Nexus approaches to increase climate resilience, it's a great honor to address you at this event that was carefully prepared by distinguished partners BMZ, GIZ, SIWI and the Japan Water Forum. It's a pity I cannot be there with you. At the 14th Conference of the Parties in November last year, our Convention on Wetlands, our parties, our contracting parties, strongly made the case for the integration of wetland-focused nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches to address climate change while simultaneously providing biological diversity and human well-being benefits. This was done through the resolution 1417, and they were right. I wanted to say that all wetland managers, sometimes we call them wetlanders, know why these nexus approaches are needed. Wetlands have been critical for climate change mitigation, adaptation, and in addition, they have the ability to store large amounts of carbon and support the water quality, water security, many livelihoods needs, and security. And they've been so important for really balancing our water cycles and moderating extreme temperatures and supporting disaster risks. However, they're also very key to human well-being and human mental health. So scaling wetland protection and restoring converted or degraded wetlands is imperative to meet the targets, global targets, climate targets, biodiversity targets, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm so pleased to see also efforts through Wetland City Accreditation that many cities are taking action to make sure that wetlands within cities are part of this nexus approach. I do look forward to seeing more collaboration at the governance level for sound policies and solutions at the local level, and I really want to wish you fruitful and inspiring discussions there at COP28. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this message. And we have also colleagues here in the room from the Ramsar Convention, so it's very good to hear you. And it's true, wetlands are at times presented really as the heroes and the solutions to climate change, but they require attention as well, and not least also in the effort to restoration of wetlands. So thank you so much for this. I am now happy to invite the third keynote speaker this evening, and also our co-convener, Ms. Yumiko Asayama from the Japan Water Forum, and she will talk about the case of Japan and science-based policy development for climate resilience and the promotion of the nexus and policy coherence. Yumiko, you have the floor.
Catherine, for introducing me. And I also thank you for organizing a side event together with our organization, with the SIWI and the Convention of Ramsar Secretariat. And today, Japan, I would like to introduce a case more focused on the flood control, because flood control is very important history, important policy history due to our unique land feature, climatological, meteorological, and hydrological conditions. And Japan, because of that, scientific researcher has conducted lots of research involving climate modeling, downscaling, impact projection, adaptation strategy formation. Their collaborative effort comprehensively guided action for desired society in 2050 and beyond for future generations. And these outcomes serve as scientific-based policy formation at the national and local level. And initially, Japan's flood control more focused on urban area because lots of population and with good important economic asset is located mostly in coastal area. But because of social change and also the recent prolonged impact of climate change and social trends, and also because of the advancement of science and technology, Japanese government recognized imperative to conduct proactive measures to bolster resilience against evolving challenge. And it embraces innovative flood management policy called river-based disaster resilience and sustainability by all. And this comprehensive policy design a river basin as a space comprising watershed and floodplain area, guiding comprehensive and multi-layered action of various relevant sectors focused on the flood control prevention, explorer reduction, and disaster resilience. And importantly, that underscores the necessity for collaboration among stakeholders, not only national and local government, but also private sector and local communities making use of their strengths. It promotes embracing holistic strategy encompassing the entire Beijing from upper to lower Beijing, say, so-to sea. And by seamlessly integrating structural and non-structural disaster reduction measures. And similarly, Japan also aimed to comprehensive water risk management, fostering stakeholder collaboration in water utilization and environmental consideration, energy and security and food security within the river basin disaster resilience and sustainability framework. It includes facilitating optimal use of existing dam and facility through collaborative effort among river basin stakeholders, including local communities and farmers, and support technique for paddy use and irrigation pond for multi-purpose uses, and ensuring water supply system and adapting to change in agriculture and social and economic demand examines the way for climate resilience, and consolidating, restructuring water supply and sewage facility for enhanced efficiency. And of course, it also promotes green infrastructure, conserving or reproducing economic function to establish an ecological network, contribute to disaster risk mitigation. And also, we are also now recently pursuing hydrological power generation, restructuring the water utility system toward achieving carbon neutral by 2050. Our strategy aims to improve land use planning and lifestyle for enhancing convenience, comfort, and safety society by conducting climate-resilient flood prevention measures. So in our this policy, creating a scheme to enhance collaborative involvement from all people within the river basin is crucial for success. Hence, in order to identify what each stakeholder doing, Japanese government also established working level conference of relevant ministry and agency for the promotion of river basin disaster resilience and sustainability by all. And also, lots of information and activity related to the promotion of climate change adaptation and resilience are also correlated in the information platform, so-called the Climate Change Adaptation Information Platform, which is a web-based platform to offer information in an easy-to-understand way what each different stakeholder are doing to promote adaptation and climate resilience measures. In conclusion, exploring nexus for climate resilience highlights the crucial role of multi-sectoral policy and social interaction from the perspective of water resource management. Recognizing a river basin as an integrated system helps pinpoint relevant sectors, stakeholders, challenge, and opportunity. And this river basin perspective also assists developing legal framework and facilitate effective climate change adaptation action. And this approach, embracing assessment of nexus system, laying the foundation for climate strategy. Finally, measuring progress and accelerating information sharing is also essential for informed policy making in the nexus approach. And of course, policy, government leadership is both important, but in implementation at the local scale, fostering facilitators within scientific and local expertise is also imperative to navigate climate resilience challenge and ensuring proactive response. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yumiko, for showing how a comprehensive and integrated approach to resilience was at the core of the development of the policy, but also how, in order to draft that policy and write it and implement it, a multi-stakeholder dialogue and collaboration was what was behind the development of that policy. And I think those two elements really came out quite strongly in your experience, which is very interesting. So thank you so much for sharing that. So let's turn to panel number 1, and I am glad to invite to the stage. I will first invite the Secretary of the Ministry of Rural Development of the Government of India to come. Please join me on stage. Ms. Shri Shalay Kumar Singh? No.
I help you with that.
Okay, you will introduce yourself then, I think. This is what I have on my script.
all right.
It's all right. I'm so sorry.
My name is Aditi Singh. I'm the director at the Rural Development Ministry of India. Mr. Shailesh Singh is the secretary.
Okay.
I have been nominated by him to attend today's panel.
Well, you are very welcome.
Thank you so much.
To the panel, and I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. Perfectly fine.
I am then happy to invite the Deputy Coordinator of Lesotho's ICM coordination unit, who is joining us virtually. So I am hoping that the technology will be on our side this evening. And this is Matsolo Migwi. And I am also happy to invite Alexander Jokic to join me. Also virtually, actually, who is the project coordinator for Jordan at the Federal Institute of Geosciences and Natural Resources. So, are we, Manuel, they are both online? Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'm not seeing, okay, perfect, great. So, starting with you, in India, you have contextualized the water-land nexus by developing a composite water resource management, CWRM framework. Explain to us, what is that?
I would contextualize it, if you permit, with the scheme that I am representing broadly, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. And that is anchored in our legislation, and it's a scheme that's been ongoing for nearly 2 decades now. And in a vibrant democracy as ours, where everything is very keenly contested, this scheme enjoys wide political acceptance and popularity among the people, right from the villages to the national capital. A major reason for that is that 78% of the permissible works under this scheme involve water-related activities, agriculture and allied activities, which are immediately impacting and bringing about positive climate change action. Very briefly in a line, I would like to say that this scheme covers 150 million families across the nation of the rural areas, which includes 260 million beneficiaries. What it basically entails is that each family gets 100 days of unskilled manual work within a financial year, and of these works, almost 78% are directly contributing to ecological biodiversity, to improvement of soil and land health, and of course, water being an important part of it. As you were mentioning, water resource management, the watershed development is an important thrust area for us in this, and all these agri-allied activities actually bring them together. Groundwater recharge, again, is an important area for us. We have the Mission Water Conservation Guidelines, which were launched in 2016 nationally. Under that, we have identified all the water-stressed areas, which are classified as semi-critical and critical blocks. And here we have groundwater recharge structures and other watershed area management activities, which are undertaken on a more intensive and focused manner. I would also mention here that last year, we had the Prime Minister launch Mission Amrit Sarovar, which roughly translates in English as Elixir for Immortality, ponds that are providing that. So we have 740 districts in the country, and every district was charged with creating at least 75 of these traditional water bodies by creating better inlet-outlet structures, by having plantations around them, so on and so forth. And of course, all of it includes the local community, because this entire scheme is demand-driven. Only when the villagers come together at the beginning of the year and they decide this is the shelf of work we want in our village council to be undertaken, and these works are also selected, then they go ahead in that financial year and do so. So it is a demand-driven, bottom-up approach that is being followed. And an important initiative here is that since 2017, we have a water budgeting action at every village council level. What it entails is that whatever the deficit and surplus calculation of water available through rainfall, through groundwater, the village council gets together along with the technical field support staff, and they create a budget basically of how much they need for different kinds of crops which are being sown in that area, and for potable drinking water, and for livestock, and for other uses that may be there for domestic usage. This, number one, generates awareness about the critical issues related to water. Number two, you create this kind of initiative within the people that we need to conserve water for the future, for our users, and how to best use them. Since this panel is considered to be practice into policy, and I've spoken too much about policy, I must say that the scheme also undertakes the rejuvenation of traditional water bodies in the villages. So that again is a practice that is being supported through this scheme. Lastly, I would like to mention that since last year, that is 2022, all the open wells in the villages are being selected and they are being measured in the pre-monsoon and the post-monsoon season through a very simple and cost-effective method, a graduated steel tape. If that is also not available, we provide a weighted rope, and this is being done completely locally. 488,000 wells approximately have been measured till date, and these are just more, I would not say scientific, but statistical inputs into policy making at the very ground level, at the village level. So there are very exciting opportunities still ahead for us to work in this. As Dr. Hildebrandt had mentioned briefly, we have also been working on international cooperation projects like ICRG and VASCA project, again, which contributes to climate resilience. We look forward to more such engagements internationally, and at the local level, as you can make out from the outline, which has not been so brief, I guess, that it is a sector that has a lot going on, and we are continuously trying to push further new initiatives while taking in the traditional knowledge available at the local level because of the geographical and topographical diversity of the region. And as she was mentioning that flood control has been neglected, I would like to add here that cyclones, droughts, and floods, these are three areas of concern that we have also taken up under the scheme. As far as flood controls go, we provide spurs, and those kind of flood channels, diversion channels are also permissible works. As far as drought goes, as I had mentioned earlier, 100 days of work is available normally, but in any area which is notified as drought affected, we provide additional 50 days of work to the villagers in those families. I would also mention that it is a socio-economically, culturally holistic scheme where we have notified scheduled tribes under the forest covered areas. There also we provide as a rule 50 days of additional employment in order to ensure that all the strata of society are able to be in the mainstream of development and it leaves no one behind. As far as cyclones go, we provide under the scheme works related to cyclone shelters and so on, belt vegetation, mangrove plantations, all sorts of activities in order to tackle the impact of tidal effects. I think I should stop here lest I monopolize all the time of the panel.
But it is fascinating, and of course when you hear the scale of things in India, those figures are always mind-boggling for someone from, a small country. The figures, just the millions, and it is really, really quite impressive. And what I pick up on really from your presentation is really this: you raise the awareness, you create the understanding, you then move to really generate the local ownership of the issue, the problem, but also the solution, the budget, and the accountability, therefore, for delivering on it. And the fact that it has always been demand-driven is, I think, absolutely critical. And your last point really on also the data collection and the importance of data collection to actually do the right things at the right moment in the right place by the right actors is, I think, very important. So that's really what but thank you so much for sharing this experience. So now that we've heard the Indian experience, I'm happy to turn to Lesotho next to hear how Lesotho has approached its work to enhance climate resilience in the sectors.
Good evening. My name is Matsulo Migui from Integrated Catchment Management Unit, Renuka Movement. In Lesotho, we have a national program which is multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder program that is promoting or using the integrated catchment management approach, whereby we are dealing with the land management and water resources management. We are dealing with it both at the national up to the community level. And in this program, what we are promoting is the multi-sectoral, the integrated planning, coming up with nature-based solutions that improve the livelihoods of the communities at the local level. What basically we are working under 6 change areas, whereby we are dealing with the catchment management change area, where we are dealing with the reversal of land degradation, promoting integrated planning, both at the catchment level and at the community level to improve the livelihoods, but also to reverse the land degradation that occurs in the catchments. Then we also are promoting the risk-informed planning in the sense that we undertake the climate change risk assessment before we come up with solutions. We are also working under the policies at the national level, but also trickling down to the local level, whereby we are supporting the development of bylaws that will really assist the communities to regulate the natural resources within their own space. And in this manner, also, we are trying to capacitate or put in place the institutions, the multi-sectoral institutions, both at the catchment level, but also at the community level, whereby we are trying to bring in different sectors from the land, the environment, water, for them to be able to manage their resources holistically. Basically, also what we are looking into is the issue of monitoring and data, whereby we are trying to develop a system whereby we could have the integrated data system, whereby all these sectors will be able to use the data on the ground to be able to inform their planning processes, and a lot of capacity building also at the catchment level, but also at the community level. And for that, we come up with 2 levels of planning, whereby we are having the integrated catchment management and development plans at the catchment level, which is at the regional level, and also what we call the ICM Action Council Action Plans, which is basically the bottom-up approach, whereby we are dealing with the communities, the needs of the communities on the level to come up with solutions towards climate change resilience. Basically, the long and short of this is what we are doing in Lesotho. But like I have said, that this is a national movement also. We have other programs that are basically using the guidelines and that are developed under the program, whereby different role project, which is also dealing with such issues of trying to promote the climate change resilience in the country. Thank you.
For sharing the experience in Lesotho, and especially sharing how the policies are translated at the different levels and different scales, from catchment to community, national, and really how they need to be translated and contextualized in that sense. Thank you so much for sharing that experience. India, Lesotho. So let's now turn to Jordan. probably one of the absolutely most water scarce countries in the world. Mr. Jokic, can you please describe how in Jordan and how the Jordanians are dealing with the water scarcity that you have when it comes to interaction with other sectors and the policy work that is going on? Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you also for the invitation. My name is Alex Jokic. I'm working for the BGR, which is a Federal Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources, and we are financed by the BMZ. And I was happy to hear from Dr. Hildebrand that she said from Nexus thinking to Nexus doing, and I think our project might be a good example how the Nexus thinking can be translated into doing. You said it already. Jordan is one of the water scarcest countries in the world. The groundwater in Jordan, where we are working with our project on, is the backbone of Jordan's water supply. And Jordan's population has increased a lot over the last 60 years, from a few 100,000 people to 11 million today, which have to be supplied by water. The water use in Jordan is already twice as high as its renewable resources. So Jordan is already using the fossil groundwater and is taking water that is not coming back at the moment. 2/3 of the water is actually going to agriculture. So this means this is the main link to the Nexus also. And the water deficit in Jordan has increased over the last years a lot, and having also impacts on the ecosystems. For example, the Azraq oasis, which dried out, and also can be seen at other places. The other reason why there is a Nexus link is that Jordan is pumping its water from a depth of like 100, 300, 500 meters, which makes energy consumption very high, and which makes the water sector one of the biggest energy users in Jordan, and which increases the depth of the water sector a lot. The water sector itself cannot be run by water tariffs, so a lot is financed by donors through the one or the other way. And there's really a big problem of over-abstraction, and Jordan is facing on a way where one day it will be too expensive to pump the water. And so there's a really big problem. When you think of overall planning in Jordan, there is the problem is be seen by the water sector, by the water ministry, and so on. They know the problem, but the problem is not really understood over all the other sectors. So if you are a farmer in the desert, you can still pump water, you have your own well, but from year to year, water pumping is more expensive, and your costs are even higher. The fruits are going to export, you have to compete on the market. This means that one day you will not be able to be competitive on the market anymore. So as we are coming from the water sector, and the water sector is one of this the key of that problem, or also the key of the solution, we developed communication models and communication tools, and supporting or making the voice of the water sector stronger in Jordan with the project.
For sharing the experience in Jordan. In the interest of time, I will ask one more question to this panel. And I will go with Aditi, who is honoring her with her presence here in the room. I'm interested and curious to hear how, and you touched upon it in your presentation of the initiative, but how do you see this interaction between sectors when it comes both to collaboration, to communication, but how do you see that being integrated in the initiative and the efforts that you described so well earlier on?
So at a governmental level, within the national scenario, I would like to mention that the scheme has a convergence oblique whole of the government approach, where we are working with all the other ministries like the land resources, women and child development, and so on and so forth. And our programs are dovetailed with them, and we bring them on board in order to implement these activities in a way that all the stakeholders can be involved, because climate is a concern for everyone, not just a particular ministry or a particular sector which is most affected by it maybe today, but everybody would be impacted later on. And of course, at the international level, again, as I said earlier, that we have been having projects that have been ongoing, and we will continue to engage with that. It is entirely a social-driven kind of activity, and to conserve water for the future is a concern for all of us, and the scheme is designed in such a way that it brings all the initiatives in that manner to the forth. And by empowering people with the knowledge and with the tools to be able to implement these works at the field level is probably the best way to go about it, because the one who's most impacted would be the most sensitive to the effects and the kind of changes their efforts can bring.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Do and do right. It shouldn't be more complicated.
We'll
than
try
that,
our best.
No, thank you so much for sharing that experience, and thank you also to our panelists, our virtual panelists online. I think they deserve a round of applause before we go to panel number 2. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So now we've deep dived with 3 concrete examples into the development of the policies. That's been the focus for this panel number 1. So let's now move on to panel number 2, where we will see how we translate these policies into practice, so the implementation side of things. So I have the pleasure of having Professor Pamela McElwee, the co-chair of Nexus Assessment at Rutgers University, with us as a panelist, and Ms. Mabel Zuniga, climate change analyst at the Ministry of Environment of Panama.
Yes, very sorry. I've just received a message from Ms. Zuniga that she is still stuck in the negotiations of the global goal on adaptation, trying to bring a strong framework that can enhance action and support of primaries to increase the adaptive capacity and resilience within our countries where the adaptation is highly needed. So I apologize deeply that she will not be able to make it to the panel.
Okay, well, we are here to try and do our best anyway, so we will move on and hear the experience from you.
Yeah. Thanks. So it's a pleasure to be on this panel to discuss nexus issues, because that is precisely what some of our current science policy interfaces are trying to do in terms of figuring out the interlinkages across these important areas. So I think many of you in the room have heard of IPBES. It's basically the biodiversity equivalent of the IPCC. The mandate is to try to incorporate and understand and assess biodiversity regularly and prepare updates on the state of nature to the signatory governments of IPBES. And so IPBES does regular assessments, just like the IPCC does. And currently we are doing an assessment called the Nexus assessment, which we hope is a perfect complement to much of the work that's happening on the ground that we've heard about. And so the task of the Nexus assessment, and it's got 160 scientist authors from around the world, is to assess the state of knowledge across these interlinkages. And for us, in the Nexus assessment, we're looking particularly at the interlinkages between biodiversity, climate, water, food, and health. So many of the things that we've heard about here today. And our task is to really understand what those interlinkages and interconnections are. Two-way interactions, three-way interactions, even 4- and 5-way interactions across all of those elements. We've been asked to look at the past, present, and future trends, so thinking about scenarios across those 5 elements. We've been asked to present concrete policy and response options to governments based on the best available science to try to understand where, in an era of limited budgets, where we can get the most bang for our buck, where we can get those integrated policies that cut across different elements and perhaps even save money at the same time by not having conflicting policies. So it's a very tangible assessment grounded in the idea that there are policy examples out there that we need to highlight and think about. How do we scale them up? How do we scale them out? How do we take the lessons from India and Jordan and Lesotho and think about how they could be best practices for other places as well? So we are in the process right now of developing that assessment. I'd like to put a little plug in because these assessments rely on public and government comments to make them the best assessments they can be. And we are in an open comment period right now. So the review will be open until January 14th. We urge reviewers to go to the website ipbes.net, sign up to be a reviewer. You can download all of the chapters. There are 7 main chapters plus a summary for policymakers. And we encourage people to give us comments and tell us if we're finding the right things so we can finalize this assessment by December of next year and hopefully have all of the stakeholders be able to use it and have it be effective for their work.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you also for I'm thinking here in this operationalization of the policies, there is very clearly a need to enable multi-level governance, and I think the example from India was very clear on that. The example from Lesotho was also very clear on the need for that. What actions do you think and see are necessary to actually achieve that multi-level and let's say horizontal integration when it comes to precisely putting policy into practice?
Yeah, this was specifically requested of us to look at these sorts of issues. So we've got a chapter 4, which is on governance approaches and options, and it's precisely on these issues. What capacities are needed? What sorts of multi-level governance approaches, either polycentric or network or market governance approaches, might be needed for different options. We don't want to present a one-size-fits-all solution. We want to understand what's appropriate to different contexts. How do we scale these up? This is really important as well because there's different ways that other areas can learn from one another. And so we're trying to highlight some of the best practices in this area as well. So because the assessment is ongoing, I can't say the specifics, but just to say chapter 4 is where you want to find all of these great ideas that we're trying to generate from the literature. But just to say, because it's an assessment, we rely on there being literature that we can then compile and review. So if we are missing studies, if we haven't learned some great case studies that might be folks in the audience know about and would like to share with us, you can do that through the review process as well. So if you've got a great multi-sectoral or multi-scalar case study, please, through the review process, let us know about it. It would be a great chance to showcase that. The report relies a lot on large-scale assessments where we're trying to quantify the scale of the literature, how much agreement there is, but also a lot of very detailed case study boxes. And so we like to feature places where things are working really well. So let us know examples of that, and we'd like to try to include that in our assessment as well.
But this is an incredibly important well of knowledge as well, and of relevant concrete experiences and real case studies to really see what works, what maybe doesn't work, and how we can then leapfrog and in many cases then do the right thing in the right way from the very beginning. So really learning from past experiences and not repeating maybe the same mistakes or insufficient actions and expecting maybe a different result. So by showcasing this and with this ambition of we're showing this, contextualize it, apply it, and scale it up, I think that's incredibly useful as an exercise. So yeah, I think we're all eager to wait, was it December next year?
December of next year.
December 2024.
Right, and because it was requested by governments and policymakers, we're trying to make it as practical as possible. So we're eager to complete it as well, but it's a lot of work, as you can imagine, thousands of documents, thousands of scientific reports, gray literature. We're also consulting with indigenous and local communities in different dialogues to bring in different value systems and worldviews as part of this understanding.
Multi-stakeholder governance.
Multi-stakeholder, even
Yep,
through
absolutely.
assessments. So these are all crucial components.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Professor, for your insights. Please have a seat. Aditi, you're welcome back on stage as well. I would just like to take an opportunity to open up if there are any questions. No, please.
Let's stay
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Okay,
stay
yeah,
on.
thank you.
If there are any questions from the floor and or online, given indeed a dropout of a speaker, we have a little bit of time. If there are not all the questions tonight, and I think no one will mind maybe if we finish 15 minutes early on the last day of the COP. I think that is also perfectly okay. But Dani, you have a question.
Yes, thanks so much. It was really inspiring hearing these stories. I noted that there were amazing examples of strong, powerful women, both at the local level and at the governance, higher governance levels. And I was wondering to what extent perhaps gender transformative governance or gender women's empowerment within your assessment figured and how, and also what your take would be on encouraging women's participation at the local level.
It's not.
It's all right.
Yeah, now it's working. It just took a second.
So, as I said, the scheme is governed by a legislative act. 33% of the beneficiaries mandatorily have to be women, and we have surpassed that. Currently, 59% of the participation rate is of women in this scheme.
59%.
So the works that are being undertaken are actually being done by women, and we also ensure that there are creche facilities and those kind of initiatives so that they are not discouraged from leaving home and coming to the work site. And I should also mention that we also do a time motion study in every state where we see for a certain output, for certain activities, how much time is being taken, and it is different from males, females, people with disabilities. So everyone is given an equal wage rate yearly based on the capacity output on a scientific basis. So I think that encourages women's participation to a large scale.
And just from our perspective, in terms of the assessment, gender is one of the cross-cutting issues we were specifically asked to look at. So what is the evidence behind issues such as women's empowerment? Where do we see the effectiveness that's playing out then in better management, and can we quantify that? Can we figure out how to, again, maybe take some of the lessons and move it someplace else? So those are all issues that we are absolutely looking at, and several of our chapters are pinpointing specific gender-specific policies that seem to be the most effective. So we look forward to sharing those when that analysis is complete, but it's very much a part of what we're interested in.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Mario from BMZ as well, and I have a question to Professor McElvey. I think you're doing a great work of connecting the topics of the nexus. So I think this topic is also to ask the question from Bonn to today, where did we get? So I would like to get a big, ask the bigger question on the nexus, on what do you think, how can we put these topics together? As I think if we've seen Ariane's title, we as policymakers, it's our work to putting these topics together to think break the silos. And I would just love to hear from you, being at the COP as well, connecting it with the climate topic. How did we proceed from what today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have all of the answers. I will say I come to the climate COP. I also go to the biodiversity COP. And of course, one of the questions I always get is, why don't we have a joint COP, right? Why do we continue to have them separate? But I think people recognize how many interconnections there are, right? Most of the side events had an element of nature, water, health, and so forth, right? There's this recognition of how important all of these issues are to the central core of a climate COP. Whether or not we'll be able to do more things institutionally moving forward is sometimes a difficult question, because getting institutions that have been set up a certain way to come together is always challenging. We did, for example, a workshop report between the IPCC on climate and IPBES on biodiversity a few years ago, and it was the first time those two institutions had worked together. And so we basically took a look at the same problem with our different lenses and came up with a report together. So it's those sorts of collaborations I think we're seeing more of. All of the interest and enthusiasm around nature-based solutions as a place that brings together these elements. So I think we're seeing it. I'm optimistic that we're going to have nexus policies moving forward, but they've definitely been in the minority, right? A lot of our policies have been very siloed in the past, and so it's learning how to move beyond that, where the successes have been, how have institutions been able to make those interconnections and reconfigure their departments or have more cross-coordination linkages. That's all part of what we're assessing as well, looking for the answers to that question, because it's what everybody wants to know, how to do it better. Yeah, how to be more integrative. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your inspiring presentations, both of you, your talks. I'm Flore Lafay-de-Michaud from the Secretariat of the Convention on Wetlands, and I was thrilled about this say on thinking nexus and doing nexus. It's like two different things, but I would like to know from your experience in your both role, how do you see that the thinking nexus can trickle down into the doing nexus? Is it really a link, in fact? How much effective it is to think nexus, to be able to do nexus? What is your experience? Thank you.
The professor always likes to put the policy implementer ahead, right? So, to my limited knowledge, I would say that when we are talking about the nexus between thinking, we are looking at the interlinkages between soil health, land degradation, other environmental issues. And when we are talking about doing, I had briefly touched upon it when I said that we have an approach of convergence, not just within the ministries, but the various sectors that work at the field level. And I think we're already doing it. That interconnectedness is very evident to the people. It's not something that is just in theory, or it's just something that policymakers are discussing. The wisdom that we have in the villages, in the ground, in the indigenous communities, it's actually we who are recognizing it much later. And those lessons that we bring into the policy formulation and we actually implement it, I think it's just a virtuous circle that we are somewhat working upon now. And it's not really a separate thing, it's a continuum now, the thinking and the doing, as it should be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the reasons why we were asked to do this nexus assessment by governments is because there had been this burgeoning literature. So people were already thinking very deeply about the nexus. It really started in the sort of water, energy, food nexus approach, more than a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago now. And so there's already a basis of knowledge, and so that allows us then to look for those lessons, to turn it into, we're asked to be policy relevant but not prescriptive, so policy relevant lessons, like our assessments don't tell governments what to do, but they do provide an assessment of a range of options. So if you were to do this, this would be the likely consequence. If you were to do this other thing, this might be a different consequence. So the fact that there's such a large number of people who've been thinking about nexus issues allows us then to pull those lessons out and translate them into doing. So to me, it's all part of a continuum, as Aditi just said. Yeah.
Really enjoying this conversation, and my question is, so you're talking about sectoral nexus, but then there's also kind of geographical nexus. So the work that I do is called Source to Sea, and we're really looking at the connections between land, freshwater, coastal, and marine ecosystems, and how when you're doing something in one part of that Source to Sea system, it can have effects either upstream or downstream or both, and those can be virtuous or not. And so I'm just curious, is that aspect of thinking geographically within the nexus thinking, is that anything that either of you are delving into?
I mean, I can answer for our assessment to say definitely yes. That was one of the things we were asked to look at. So there's a growing literature on this idea of teleconnections, the idea that demand for products in one part of the world connects that part of the world to someplace else. There's huge literatures on things like virtual water and so forth. And so all of those connections in terms of our trade regimes, our policy regimes, feedback loops among the sectors themselves or the elements themselves have all been things we've been asked to look at and to try to understand those flows, those feedbacks, those cascades and compounding effects often, right? That these are multiple things happening in multiple places. So for sure, we're doing both the nexus in terms of sectoral, we're doing the nexus in terms of regions, we're doing the nexus in terms of policies as well. There's different policy approaches that we might take. Some might be more market-oriented, some might be more focused on indigenous people's worldviews and capturing different values for nature. Those are all part of our what's called our scoping report, what we've been asked to do. So it's a very comprehensive but very complex way to do an assessment because it requires a lot of big picture thinking, but also the detailed case studies that I've mentioned.
We utilize GIS and remote sensing data for the works planned in the village councils, and this is done annually. We follow a ridge to valley approach for all the works that are undertaken for water harvesting and water conservation structures. As you would understand, the structures are planned in such a way from the ridge to the valley that it slows down the flow of water and enhances soil moisture conservation. So in a very practical way, I would say that is how we are going about it. As far as the coast is concerned, as I mentioned earlier, we have efforts like belt vegetation and mangrove plantation, those kind of things. But from the source to the sea, that is not specifically something that we are targeting yet, maybe in the future.
Thank you. We also have another question in the room, but I would also like to open up for our online panelists, if they want to, from Lesotho or from Jordan, maybe provide some insights to the questions that have been asked. It's hard for me to see the screen, but... No? Okay, so let's take the question in the room.
Okay, pleasant good afternoon. I'm Titus Antoine from Grenada, that's in the Caribbean. You might not know. My question was for Professor McElwee. Is it, well, I'm not sure. Well, but both panelists, I would say. I would want to pose the question. My question is around the financing structure for the whole issue of the nexus. Yeah. I mean, where I come from, we've had pilot projects, Ridge to Reef projects, etc., and some good activity trying to bring, for watershed management and so on. We've even had a major project with the GIZ in terms of our water resource, which is actually the singular project transforming our nation at this time. My question though was, how did you get forgive me, I forgot the name, but the idea of bringing in the community, the participation from the women and getting the community involved, even piloting it as a socio-economic issue. I would love to know the financing structure design behind that, because as small island developing states, sometimes it's challenging. We don't have the resource in country. we have to basically qualify for resources, external resources, which usually have restrictions and limitations, and some of that may not be permissible. So I would love to know how you got that done, because for us, in my mind, we would greatly amplify the work that needs to be done at the community level if we were allowed to do something like that. So I thought it was genius, and I would just love to hear some more about that.
The scheme is funded by the Government of India, and as I mentioned earlier, 60% of the expenditure has to mandatorily be on agriculture and allied activities, which involves natural resource management, watershed area management, and so on. And as far as women's participation goes, again, it is mandatory to have minimum 33% women beneficiaries, but we have gone far ahead of that now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, Sonia. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. So as you may know, under the Water Convention, we have actually since 2013 a task force on the nexus and have carried out intersectoral nexus assessments. But I wanted to share that in my experience, it's really that we need to understand the other sector and find the entry point, which can actually be climate change. So I remember working in the Dniester basin between Ukraine and Moldova, where we tried to bring on board the energy sector, and they didn't want. They felt, why water, why to bother with it? And when they realized that their own, for example, hydropower facilities were actually affected by the increasing water variability, and they needed actually information from the water side how to better manage and how to keep there, then we managed to bring them on board. So, and similarly now, even within UNECE, where we have now started to cooperate quite a lot with our energy division, I think when they start now to see that renewable energies have also the water implications, etc., now they're ready that we organize joint session. We had a joint session at Energy Forum, which was organized on water by them, or starting to have joint projects, but it takes a long time. I mean, many years until finally getting to this point. And so maybe just my question would be how to replicate this, and still how to keep it still manageable, so to say.
I would say you've hit on one of the difficult challenges, which is how to move from that nexus thinking to nexus doing and get stakeholders on board. And so, as you were mentioning, and as we started the session with this idea that climate change is really a water problem, right? That becomes your entry point. For us at IWMI, biodiversity is our entry point, because we know that if we manage nature better, we get biodiversity benefits, but we also potentially are getting water benefits. We're addressing the problem of climate change and so forth. So IWMI did a very large assessment in 2019 looking at the major drivers of biodiversity loss, of which there are 5. The first one is land use change and sea use change, direct exploitation, and the third is climate change, but that is the one that is growing and expanding. And so we know that climate change will continue to be a bigger and bigger influence on loss of biodiversity. And so for us, it made perfect sense to have climate biodiversity be entry points, and then we know the important intersections then with food, water, and health. And bringing in health was also a little bit unusual because the biodiversity community hasn't engaged as much with the health sector, although I would say since COVID, that's become very clear that those linkages are incredibly important to think about the role of land use change in creating the conditions for pandemics. The way that we manage our nature might create opportunities for medicinal plant use and so forth. So it's bringing in different communities together with, for us, the biodiversity community that's enabled us to find some new points of interest. As you said, the entry points, they may be very different depending on that sector, and so you just have to come together and find them.
Good. Are there any other questions in the room or online? Not that I can... No? Okay, not that I can see. Thank you so much to everyone. I will not really try to summarize this discussion because it's been actually very rich and you know, the room is maybe not full, but because of that, it actually creates real opportunities to deep dive a little bit, which is something that I've appreciated a lot. I think I will conclude by quoting, because it has now become an official quote, I think everyone has referred to it, Ariana's keynote, where she mentioned very early on in the keynote that we need to go from nexus thinking to nexus doing. And that has really come through, really throughout all interventions today. It's really been my pleasure to facilitate this discussion today. Thank you very much to the presenters, to the panelists, and to you all for your very wise questions. I can't wait for this to really see it happen, make it happen, and as SIWI, we are always happy to also contribute to making it from the thinking to the doing. So thank you so much for today. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Safe travels back to wherever you are heading back. And let's keep our fingers and toes crossed that the final stages of the negotiations are successful. But thank you so much for today.